Oh, I love in Nehemiah where he allowed God to break his heart for the things that break God's heart, and God broke my heart for the people nobody wanted. And that was it. Started with the orphans. I went to the baby house, and when I came, they didn't want to let me come in, and it's a closed facility, so normally no one from the outside's ever allowed in there. And they just kept questioning me, and I said, please, I just want to bring the love of Christ to these children. And the director jumped up, came around, grabbed me by the shoulders, and burst into tears and kissed me on both cheeks. She said, you're the first Christian that's ever walked into this place. Now come and see the kids. And she said, I'm going to warn you, some of them are very hard to see. And we walked into the first room, and it was this small room with 12 cribs all just shoved up against each other in the darkness. And across the room, I saw this little baby, probably about 3 months old, and his head was bigger than the rest of his body. And it was like a magnet. I just walked over and I put my finger in his crib, and he reached up and grabbed my finger and smiled at me. I was broken. I was captivated. I was captured. I went every single bed, and they finally had to pull me out of the room, and they took me in another room, and there were little older kids there, maybe 1 to 2. And this little boy came flying across the room, and he jumped in my arms, threw his arms around my neck, and buried his head right here, and he wouldn't move. And after 15 minutes, they had to pry him off of me. How can you not be broken for that? And these kids just sit there. They just lay there. Nobody pays any attention to them. And so what God put in my heart is just go and hold them. These kids, just go and hold them and love on them. And then I wanted to know, well, where are the older kids? And then I ended up at the boys' house for imbeciles, which is mentally retarded. In Ukraine, if your child is put in an orphanage and there's no stimulation, they don't pick the kids up and hold them even when they're fed. Brand new born baby is fed with a bottle propped up. And so all of these kids are slow. And when they're about 3 years old, they send them in a room with 7 or 8 experts, and they test them to see if they're normal. And when they decide they're not normal, they're labeled an imbecile, and then they are going to be in an institution till the day they die. I can't imagine being sentenced to an institution when I was 3 years old to live in until I die. And it's kind of simultaneous to that. For a 10-day period, every time I was out walking, someone would be laying in the street or on the sidewalk, and people would just step over them like they were invisible. And what do you do as a Christian? How do you walk away from that? And I couldn't speak the language, and I just kept saying, God, what are you doing in my heart? And at that moment, I was just birthed in me. I have to do something. God's telling me to do something. You know, one of the things God put in my heart is God always seeks a relationship with us, and it's always long-term. And so the bottom layer of our ministry is a long-term relational ministry to stay involved in the lives of the people and the kids. The first wheelchairs I brought in 3 wheelchairs for the Cerebral Palsy Center. And then God just put it on my heart to, why don't you dream about bringing in some more? Now we've given over probably closer to 4,000 wheelchairs all over Ukraine. I could actually use 500 wheelchairs a year because I have churches coming to me, and we train them how to do the work we do, and then we supply them with the wheelchairs.
And sometimes it's the elderly, but sometimes it's young people,
yes,
right?
Yeah. There's a spiritual darkness in Ukraine, and it is so heavy and so strong, and it manifests itself physically. You go into people's homes and it's unfailingly dark, and the people who have had a problem are in the dark, and they just don't have any hope. They have no hope that anything is ever going to get better or that anybody cares. And we walk in and there's a lot of tears, and then the question is usually, why are you here? And it just opens the door to say, we're here because God sent us. He heard your cry, and you're not alone, and there is hope because God cares.